Thank you very much, Julie, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rob Cavalieri, Regional Training, Safety and Compliance Manager for MEWP Middle East, and I'm sharing with you today a presentation about mobile elevating work platform modifications from a rental business perspective. So I work for MEWP Middle East, and we're a rental organisation predominantly, and one of the challenges we face is modifications to mobile elevating work platforms. So this presentation discusses modifications and some of the things we can do about them, so on and so forth. So I'll begin. So the definition of modification used, important to make that clear. So in American Standard A92, it defines a modification as the following: any change or changes to a mobile elevating work platform that affects the operation, the stability, safety factors, the rated load, or the safety of the MEWP in any way. And for your information now, A92, the Australian standard AS 1418.10 and EN 280 CE are very similar. So the definition is not vastly different from either of those standards I mentioned, and they're the MEWPs that we will use in our rental fleet. So this slide here is from Craig Edwards, a LinkedIn post, and he's the Vice President of National Accounts in JLG. And I wanted to share this with you because it gives us a message of the following. When it's about the JLG 670 SJ boom lift. Some of you might have heard of that. It's an innovative boom lift which has self-leveling features. It's quite new to the industry. And what Craig says is, throughout the show, JLG gathered a wealth of input and feedback from these key stakeholders, putting the company's customer-inspired innovation approach front and center. And he continued to say, when you open the curtain a little around our design and our product development process, you find many ideas that resulted directly from custom input. So that's giving us an idea that also, the manufacturers gain many of their innovative ideas and their product changes from the users of the equipment. So not all modifications are necessarily bad, but they can be if they're not done in the correct manner. All right, so why do operators or why do people using mobile elevating work platforms, why do they modify MEWPs? Here's some of the reasons we can think about that modifications to a mobile elevating work platform can take place. So if the MEWP doesn't do what the user wants it to do, maybe they'll modify it to make it do what they want it to do. It could be to improve the MEWP. This may be related to reliability or the cost of ownership or safe use. So if the owner of the equipment or the user of the equipment, the MEWP says they want to do something to make it more reliable in their idea, maybe they modify it and without understanding the implications that could cause or result in. Number three, sometimes modifications are straightforward abuse or damage or unsafe use. We'll discuss some of these. And this can be quite frequently related to the competency of the user, or maybe even the competency of the technician or mechanic who's been tasked with actually maintaining the mobile elevating work platform. So competency is a very important word which we use throughout the presentation. Number four, a recurring MEWP issue. So sometimes a MEWP might have a specific problem or issue, and the owners or operators of the equipment decide they want to modify it to try and deal with that issue. Number five, sometimes the manufacturer of the MEWP may have no solution, right? The user of the equipment might want to do something with the equipment, maybe an extension deck or additional load or protect something, and there's no solution, so they'll make their own modification to try and make a solution there for their task. Number six, the OEM has a solution, but it's cost prohibitive. So we don't want to spend the money and buy the available solution, so we make our own modification. There is a supply time availability issue with an improved market available solution. So let's just say that there is a solution and an accessory available, but it's not available for a month and the project's happening now. So that's when a modification can also take place. And sometimes, number eight, the MEWP is not the correct model. for the intended task. So MEWP selection is a very important consideration, how we choose the right MEWP for the job, because if it's not the right MEWP for the job, maybe the operator will then want to modify the MEWP to make it the right MEWP for the job. And that can cause some issues, of course. And sometimes, number 9, people will modify MEWPs just to make cash. So that's some of the reasons why MEWPs are modified. Now remember, I'm discussing MEWP modifications today from the rental organisation perspective. So the main types of categories of modifications I'm going to talk about now that can occur in what we call the rental cycle. So this circle here you can see on the right-hand side is a typical rental organisation rental cycle. You can see the yellow line here. And now above the yellow line, we have what's called the on-rent part of a rental cycle and all the processes involved there. And below the yellow line, we have the off-rent cycle and the processes that take place there. So let me discuss where and the types of modifications that can take place. First of all, I'll start with the below the yellow line, the off-rent cycle. So type D, what I call type D modification, can take place on the back of a delivery vehicle. So when MEWPs are coming back in from rent, they can be damaged or abused on the back of a truck. Maybe they're tied down with it too tightly, too much force, or the incorrect tie down equipment is used, and that can damage the MEWP. So this is damage or a modification to a MEWP during transportation. And also in the workshop, you can see in the rental cycle here, in the off-rent part, we have a large number of processes happening in what we call in repair, maintenance and repair in the workshop. Now, some modifications, as I mentioned before, type F, can take place in the workshop even, because maybe the technicians or mechanics need further instruction and training to elevate their competency levels to make sure the work they're doing is in accordance with the OEM, in accordance with the manufacturer, their maintenance manuals, their repair manuals, and their adjustment procedures. So sometimes we can see type F competency related modifications taking place in the workshops during maintenance. And also in the workshop, we might get OEM approved type A modifications taking place, like accessories. So the manufacturers do make accessories and they do provide modifications for their equipment. And with a professional organization, we will install those modifications in the workshop. Make sure that we use competent people to install the OEM approved modifications. So type A, and I'll jump to type C, type B here, rental company and third party approved modifications, type B. So this is where the rental organization, in conjunction with a third party, an approved third party organization with their engineers, will approve a modification to be used in the fleet. So the correct calculations will be done by the competent engineers to make sure that the MEWP still meets the design criteria to which it was built to, for example, EN280 or A92, that doesn't change, and that any relevant changes to the operator manual for instructions and use are also applied to that modification. And again, as I mentioned before, we can have type C in the off-rent part of the rental cycle where we add accessories or options to MEWPs in the workshop. Okay, now above the yellow line, on rent, what happens here? Again, when the machines are outbound from the rental depot, they can be damaged for the same reason I mentioned before, maybe tied down too tightly, too much force, or incorrect tie down method used, and that can damage the equipment, and that's an unsafe modification. But this red part of the pie here, when the machines are on rent, when MEWPs are on rent, this is where the vast majority of changes are taking place, modifications, unauthorized, are happening to mobile elevating work platforms that we have to deal with as a rental organization. We have type E and D. So what's type E? Unintended and intended modifications. So an operator or a user of the equipment making a change, maybe taking something off, adding something, modifying something because they think it's going to help them do their work, either in a better way or maybe in a faster way, for example. And we have quite a bit of damage and equipment abuse taking place when the machine's on rent. And again, that comes down to quite frequently the competency level of the operators. Do they have the required training and instruction? Is it accredited training? Who did the training? Was it competent instructors giving the training to these operators so they know if they're using the equipment correctly and they're not performing some type of unsafe act like modifying the equipment? Let's look at some of those examples now. So The picture number 1 on the left-hand side here, you can see quite elaborate modification to 2 boom lifts. These are called 3B mobile booms, telescopic booms, and you can see the baskets have been replaced by gondolas, you might call them, or light swinging stages with cable climbing hoists to go up and down the side of a structure. There's 2 examples here. These are very elaborate. The professional organisation that had this done would have gone through a design process, and that would have had a build specification, and the competent engineers would have made sure that the MEWPs still meet the requirements of the standard to which they were built to. And also there will be changes in operation, of course, and competency and the required instruction and training. So that's quite an elaborate one. Number 2, similarly, this is where the power unit, the diesel power unit's been removed from this articulating boom lift here, you can see, and it's been replaced with an electric power unit. Again, it's quite an elaborate modification, and it has to go through the correct process by the professional organisation to make that happen in a safe way, to make sure it still meets the standard, for example, EN280, to which it was built. The same safety features must be in there, the same stability features, the same design and use parameters must still be in place. So that's when it's done properly. Number 3 is an example of quite a common modification. It's netting or webbing placed outside of the MEWP's basket or platform, and it's an attempt often to prevent dropped objects. Okay, sometimes it can take the format of plastic, which can be wrapped around the basket or cage, and that can be also to prevent dropped objects, but also maybe they're welding in the basket, and it can be designed to or intended to stop weld flash and so on and so forth. But this can be a hazard. Why? Because MEWPs are designed to be used outdoors if they meet a specific requirement called the wind speed rule, which is 12.5 meters per second. So those MEWPs, the engineers who build them, so that MEWP will stay standing even if the wind is blowing 45 kilometers an hour, which is 12.5 meters per second. But if we start adding surface area to the MEWP basket or platform, then maybe it won't meet that requirement anymore. It could become unsafe or unstable when the wind is blowing. So we have to think about that. Number 4, you might think this is quite a simple modification. You can see a switch here is being changed from the OEM provided switch to maybe a substandard switch. You know, what's the big deal there? You might say, well, it can cause a malfunction. Maybe the operation of that switch will operate in a different way or won't work at all. And that means there could be an incident or accident as a result of this malfunction. So yeah, replacing even simple things like switches can cause an issue. And we often see this, we'll look at this more later, where operators will add in, and others will add in fire extinguishers to mobile elevating work platforms. MEWPs are not fire engines, so we have to think about what we're doing here. You know, this is now a dropped object hazard. It can fall out of the basket and hurt someone below, or worse, it's not attached correctly. And again, who's responsible for the maintenance program for the fire extinguisher? Has that been considered? And is it the correct material inside that fire extinguisher to put out the fire that may start? We don't know. We've got to think about that. So here's some more examples. Type A. So remember, Type A are OEM approved examples of modifications we might see with MEWPs. So they're often called accessories or options. Number 1, pipe rack systems. Often users of mobile elevating work platforms who want to do work like installing fire pipes and sprinklers and so on and so forth, or any other type of long structure. And it's not allowed to bear that load down on the handrails or the guardrails. It can affect stability. So the load needs to be borne by the platform of the MEWP basket or platform. And that's why we have OEM provided or third party, we'll talk about that more later, pipe racks. The load has to be held captive, so it's also not a dropped object hazard after we do that. So there's one example of OEM approved. Number 2, making a basket smaller or a different shape can be done, but with OEM approval or by third party approval with the relevant design calculations taking place there. And we can change tires on MEWPs, but only if it meets the manufacturer's requirements. What do tires do on mobile elevating work platforms? Many things, and one of the things is they often are used as part of the MEWP counterweight. It's counterbalanced. So a polyurethane or foam filled tire will weigh a certain weight. Let's just say it weighs about 300 kilograms. If we replace it with a solid tire of a different type, maybe we don't have the same counterweight, so we're actually affecting the MEWP stability by changing that tire. We have to think about other things, the wall height, the width of the tire, the ground contact pressure, and what's the durometer of the tire? What's the shore rating now? Because that's very important also for stability. If the tire is too soft because we put the wrong material inside, it can be a stability hazard for the MEWP. You've got to think about that. Here's another modification, quite an elaborate one from a manufacturer. You can see we've got here an electromechanical device for lifting glass. Again, if it's done in the right manner with new instructions and design approvals, it can be done in a safe manner. MEWPs are quite versatile if it's done in the right way. And here's a modification or accessory for a different type of fall protection. So here we have additional harness attachment points on the outside of the handrail of this particular basket, where someone can be outside the boom lift basket to do their work or their inspection, as long as there's been a work method statement and a required risk assessment, but it's an approved device that can be obtained from the OEMs. Here's a very simple one, number 6, a simple platform tool tray. Again, if it's done correct, it's quite safe, but you can think about dropped objects and additional load on the handrails if it's not done in the right manner. Okay. Here's some type B examples of modifications. So rental company and third-party approved modifications. You can see here, we can actually replace solid tires on MEWPs. We can relaminate the rubber on the MEWPs, the solid rubber on small battery-powered scissor lifts or small battery boom lifts even, if we use the correct material, correct hardness, the correct width, and the correct wall height. So if it's done correctly, it can be done safely. And the same if the rental organisation or others are refilling tyres with polyurethane, the foam that goes inside the tyre. We have to use the correct product. It needs to be filled to the correct pressure. It needs to cure to the correct hardness, the correct durometer rating or shore hardness rating of 25A or 45A, for example, to make sure if we're not causing a stability hazard by using the incorrect product when we're putting that product inside the tire. Number 3, even small things like adding lights to the platform or basket. Some of the considerations here, because you can get these from the OEMs and you can get them from third parties. What's the drain on the battery? Can the alternator and battery cope with that so you're not going to flatten the battery more quickly and possibly affect the machine's emergency lowering system, its auxiliary power, if it's only got one battery? And how has it been attached? Are there any sharp objects here? Is it safe the way it's been installed? Number 4, here again, we have the dropped object protection system. So you know now that we have to consider, is that MEWP still approved at 12.5 meters per second if we add that, or is it not? Do we have to derate the MEWP as a result? And also maybe we've got some snag hazards underneath the basket here that can get caught on a structure. Some things we need to think about. Number 5, a modified, quite an elaborate one, extension platform to the side of the scissor lift. Again, you have to make sure that's done in the correct manner with the design build specifications and the correct approvals if you're going to do something like that. The boom lift down the bottom here is a special platform, a very large aluminium platform, which has been modified. You can see how it's quite long and needs to be done to make sure we're not impacting the MEWP safe working load or stability. And the other thing I would note there is what's going to happen to that basket when it's in use. Will it be damaged, for example, quite easily? We have to think about the instructions and training when we're doing this. Okay, some more type B. We can see pipe racks again for a scissor lift. Again, done correctly, it's quite okay, or not, if it's not done correctly. Here we have some third-party approved, what we call secondary guarding, static secondary guarding applied to the handrails. Okay, that's got to be, it's called passive secondary guarding to protect against entrapment. Again, if you use a supplier that's looked at the design calculations and make sure they're not being detrimental to the MEWP's operation, then that can be done safely or not. Here's quite an old one, number 3, where we have an extension deck attached to the side of the scissor lift, and I'm wondering if that was done with the correct process. Does the MEWP need to be derated with its safe working load? Can it still go to the correct height, the height that it normally goes to? What are the stability changes for that mobile elevating work platform? We have to consider what indeed are the maintenance requirements now. Okay, now some detail on type A, B, E, and F. So examples here I'll keep going through, but here I'm focusing on tires. It's a big topic for a rental organisation and for mobile elevating work platforms generally. You can see here on that number 1, we've got a poorly filled polyurethane filled tyre. maybe the wrong product was used, or it didn't cure properly. Okay, and that means we have a flat spot, and that can be a stability hazard like a flat tire. It's still got urethane or foam inside the tire, but for some reason it's got a flat spot. So maybe a wrong product, or not filled correctly, and that's a stability hazard now. We have to talk about when we're repairing urethane tires, we have to be very careful that we're not hiding damage. Sometimes polyurethane or foam-filled tires will be repaired. It's a large topic, and that can actually allow damage to propagate underneath the repair without someone being able to see that. So polyurethane foam-filled tires can take a lot of damage, but we need to see it so we can make a competent person can make a judgment on whether the damage is okay or not. Okay, and a bit more detail here. You can see this number 2 here is it's about the gap. We call it the lug-void ratio I'm pointing out here. If we use the wrong tire type, we can actually change the stability of the MEWP because the lug-void ratio is quite important. This is a very large lug-void ratio. It's different to what the OEM specified over here on the right-hand side, and that can actually cause the tire to wear far more quickly, but also a stability hazard can be had because of that. So we have to think about that if we're going to be changing tires and using the product inside the tires. Okay, here's some repairs done to a scissor lift. Here we might be using a competent welder. The welder might be using the correct welding rods. They're considerations you have to think about when you're doing a repair like this. But probably, in fact, certainly, this scissor weldment on this scissor lift should have been replaced and not repaired, because the persons doing the repair weren't aware of the structural problems that might have been reducing the structural capacity of this scissor lift by undergoing that repair. So that scissor weld arm should have been replaced there, okay? Repairing the lifting structure of a scissor lift or a boom lift. Here's some smaller modifications you might think: wrapping plastic around the tires of a MEWP, maybe to prevent some markings on the ground surface if it's a delicate floor surface. And again, this can cause some problems. For example, the wire used can be a hazard for operators. It can even tear away at hydraulic hoses. So we have to think about that. Is it suitable or not? Here's the plastic around a basket of a boom lift. This one was actually used for preventing weld flash, but it's also increasing the surface area of this boom lift when it's at height. And now, is it derated? Does it still meet the 12.5 meters per second wind speed ruling? Is the question I'm asking about that. Okay, some really good examples here of some modifications done on site. You can see here this scissor lift's being used as a lighting tower. Was the stability calculations done there? What about the side load and the wind force that can make the scissor lift unstable at height? And are there any snag hazards, so on and so forth? So there's a lot to think about there, including how it's attached to the handrails. Those handrails maybe are not designed to take that load. You know, could they collapse and cause some incident after that? You see this quite often here, number 2, where we'll do filming out of mobile elevating work platforms. You know, there's extra load attached to the handrails, which are not designed to take that load, for example. And we have dropped objects here, potentially. We have extra wind loading because of the umbrella used on the platform or basket. So sometimes we mightn't think about these things, but they have to be considered if the MEWP's still going to be used in a safe manner. Now here's that fire extinguisher again. Is it a fire extinguisher suitable for the fire that's going to start? Is it attached in the correct manner? No. Is it now a dropped object hazard? Yes. And who's maintaining that? You know, checking the fire extinguisher is going to work if we need it. You know, have those things been thought about when we actually doing that? And we're putting fire extinguishers on MEWPs in the rental industry. All right, we see this too often. Sometimes operators will actually remove handrails or lower handrails to get under low areas, and they'll replace the bolts with either mild steel or no lock nuts on the bolts, or they won't put them in at all. And then we have a fall hazard for operators in the scissor lift because the wrong bolts are being used. Maybe they're not high tensile without a lock nut, and that can be a real problem. And even I'm not a fan of these quick pins. You can see there's a quick pin here. I prefer the correct high tensile bolt with a nylock lock nut because these pins can fail. They can stay in the open position, and they're very easy to leave out there as well. So yeah, I prefer a proper lock nut with a high tensile bolt rather than these quick pins, and certainly using the correct bolt and nut, not this mild steel one here you can see. And here's an example of batteries. You mightn't think about this, but MEWPs often have 2 batteries in them. One is for normal cranking or starting of the MEWP. And the second one is for actually the emergency functions, what we call auxiliary power. So if we put a smaller battery in here, trying to save money perhaps, maybe we're affecting the MEWP's emergency lowering capabilities. And in a time of emergency, maybe that boom lift cannot come down to get that person out of trouble that's in the platform or basket stranded. Maybe they've had a medical emergency. So we shouldn't be modifying a MEWP in any way like that at all. Okay, here's that switch, can cause a malfunction. If you put the wrong switch in there, which is not going to be good, maybe the machine won't work how the manufacturer intended there. Here's a basket that's been damaged on site, and the person who's damaged the basket looks like they've tried to make some type of modification here to, repair to fix it, but the actual structural integrity of this aluminium basket's now been compromised. So that's an unsafe modification. Even something like changing a fuse, maybe a fuse is blown. Fuse is there to blow for a specific reason. It means something's wrong with the electrical system. And if we go and put a 30 amp fuse in, for example, when a 20 amp fuse was rated, we can actually start a fire on that MEWP, which we certainly don't want. So we shouldn't be modifying the MEWP even by changing fuses with a larger fuse. Here's a couple of examples of very good modifications that rental companies have undertaken, changing scissor safety braces to a more contrasting color so an operator can see them and they're not blended in with the main scissor structure. They need to be used for maintenance and inspection. Good examples here. And here's in a normal charger inlet plug, which is before just hanging from the back of the machine. It's a trip hazard and a snag hazard. You can see another one here. And here's a modification where that trip and snag hazard has been taken away. It's been mounted securely to the chassis of the machine. So there are good examples. They have to be done in the right manner. So this is the last slide I'm presenting for you now. And on this last slide, I'd like to discuss some of the countermeasures that can be undertaken for MEWP modifications here. So what do we need to do? Okay, so I'll start with number one. I'll read these out. We need to increase the competence of MEWP operators. So we need to understand the risks, and operators need to understand the risks of modifications. So we need to continually promote and uptake. I recommend very strongly the Powered Access License system by IPAF. So Powered Access License holders, MEWP operators, should have a PAL card. PAL card is a Powered Access License, and if you've got a PAL card, it means your competency levels are going to be where they need to be, and so you understand not only how to use the MEWP correctly and safely and not harm yourself or others, but also that you shouldn't be modifying a MEWP at all unless you're doing it in an approved manner. So that's a very important thing to help with modifications. We need to bring awareness to more with construction companies and subcontractors and project managers on construction sites, foremen, site safety representatives. For example, we can do on-site safety days. We do those as a rental organisation. We run courses called MEWPs for managers as well, not only the Powered Access licenses, to bring awareness and knowledge to people who are responsible for managing MEWPs, not necessarily always the users, but those responsible for managing the MEWPs on site. So, you know, this knowledge is very important and will help with this as well. Number three, we need to increase the competence of workshop and field technicians always, right? This is a continual process. So this is via mandated manufacturer technician mechanic training to elevate competency levels, training programs. We need to evaluate skills of mechanics and technicians, those tasked with making sure the machines are safe to use. And we should even have technical grading guides used by rental organizations so we understand the skill levels of the mechanics and technicians using the MEWPs. Okay, number four, minimum relevant competency evaluations for third-party inspection engineering bodies and companies use for 6 and 12-month MEWP inspections and MEWP health checks. I know there's a lot of work being done with the International Powered Access Federation and the UAE authorities in this area to help elevate the knowledge and competency of the third-party inspection bodies. So they actually have the skill levels required to say, yes, the MEWP's safe to use and it hasn't been modified, or if it has been modified, it's been done in a safe manner. So that's also very important. And when you're an accredited training center with IPAF, we undergo what we call continual professional development, and we need to do more and more of that. So the more the better, to make sure our IPAF instructors, which are recognized in the industry as being the best, continually increase their knowledge as teachers. Number 6, more frequent IPAF audits for training centres. So if you're an IPAF training centre, you're an accredited training centre, and we will undergo audits at least once a year. This is very important to make sure that we're continually performing to the levels we're signing up for as training centres. Number 7, delivering IPAF curriculums to countries covering training and apprenticeship program pathways for technicians. You probably see this is a recurring theme I'm talking about here, competency of technicians and mechanics. Worldwide, there is a skills shortage in many areas, including ours, MEWPs, for competent technicians and mechanics, and the more we can do to have more available pathways for learning for MEWP mechanics and technicians is the better. Okay, and we need to lobby governments and relevant authorities to implement best practice and apply recognised solutions. So what I mean by that is sometimes where the level of infrastructure and development of a particular country may not be at the same level as another, we need to lobby governments and bring awareness that there is a best practice for this, for example. Okay, and we should apply that wherever possible. And we should have harsher penalties and repercussions for people who modify MEWPs in an unauthorised manner, remembering that they're bringing danger to themselves and to others by doing that in an unauthorised manner. Number 10, maybe a more relaxed endorsement by OEMs of good solutions and accessories added to MEWPs provided by competent third-party organisations. There's a lot of work to be done there. And also something we've done in the Middle East, we've reduced the operator license validity from 5 years to 2 years. That's to address a number of issues, but one specific one is that people are using MEWPs maybe once and then not using it for 3 years and then jumping in a MEWP, and we can sometimes, or we do forget a lot of the things we've been taught when we did our training and instruction if we're not using the MEWP regularly. So there we go, everybody, that's my presentation. I hope I didn't go too quickly and you learned something from my presentation about MEWP model modifications from a rental organisation perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that really interesting presentation, Rob. We do have some questions.
Sure.
I'll try and make sure I get them in the right order. If modifications of MEWP are done on site, it would require third-party recertification before it goes into operation again. What is your take on this? Yes,
well, modifications can be done on site if they have had that third-party certification and it's endorsed by competent authorised, either the OEM or their equivalent. Just because it's been done on site, though, it doesn't automatically make it unsafe, as long as you've got a place to make the modification which is safe and the competent people applying it. But it does have to have third-party certification. But that's not the only thing it needs, of course. I mentioned some other things, and also who are the third-party organisation we're using to certify that modification. I mentioned during the presentation, sometimes we need to look at also the accreditation maybe and the competency levels of those third parties that are actually providing those certifications. That would be my answer to that.
Okay, great. Then the next one, any specific requirements for working in night shifts, bypassing sound alarms areas very close to occupied flats? If that
right.
Makes sense.
I know where this is coming from. Yeah, this is coming from a perspective. MEWPs have what they call mobile audible. They have visual and they have audible alarms for moving backwards and forwards, for lowering the platform, and indeed if they get into an outer level situations, they have audible alarms. And these audible alarms are at a specific decibel level so that an operator, if he's 60 feet in the air, for example, we can hear them. And also if someone's walking by the MEWP, they can, if they can't see the MEWP, they can hear it coming, so they're not crushed, for example. So unfortunately, MEWPs do make noise and intentionally, as well as unintentionally, I suppose. But these, when we're talking about the audible alarms on MEWPs, yes, then the relevant, I would say, council authorities need to be contacted. So maybe the person renting the MEWP or using the MEWP has to obtain the required permits so they can make that noise during night, close to where people are living and trying to sleep and so on and so forth.
Great, thank you. Next question, can we assign operator from body control instead of operating in basket control panel.
Right.
Have I read that right?
I think they mean ground control. So yeah, MEWPs are MEWPs are designed to be used from the platform or basket, full stop, for normal use. Now they have ground controls for a specific purpose, and that purpose is for emergency use and for pre-use inspections and sometimes for maintenance, but not for normal use. If we use the MEWPs controls, whether it's a boom lift or scissor lift, from the ground, then we introduce a number of hazards, including related to depth perception and non-proportionality of the boom or scissor lift functions, for example. You have blind spots, and so deaths and injuries have occurred because operators have been operating MEWPs from the ground controls. The OEMs don't endorse it, the manufacturers, and they're not designed to be used from the ground controls. Those three specific purposes for ground control use are the only ones, and obviously we make that clear in our IPAP PAL card training as well.
Okay, fantastic. And this is the last one. I'll see if I can. So are there any training is there any training for operators of MEWPs in the UAE?
My word, great question. We have accredited training. I'm IPAP PAL card, the International Powered Access Federation PAL card training program is available for everyone in the GCC, not just UAE and worldwide. And this is what I would recommend and endorse. Okay, that's the best way to bring competence to operators. We have others providing training, but they're not accredited, perhaps. And training that takes an hour even or half an hour. You want to start questioning: did they provide competence for the people using that boom lift? So accredited training only, please. And one of the ones that I would recommend, the main one, is the International Powered Access Federation accredited PAL card powered access license training.
Fantastic. And we'll just sneak one in before I hand over to Mohammed. Is MEWP to MEWP rescue from elevated areas acceptable?
Okay, great question. Again, we covered it well and in depth in training. So we have a hierarchy of measures. Safety teams will be well aware of that. And MEWPs have their own emergency lowering systems. They have auxiliary power, for example. And during training, you learn that what you can do based on a task-based risk assessment by a competent person using the MEWP's own onboard emergency lowering systems. It has 4 minimum levels there. And basket to basket rescue is one of the last things we jump to because it is full of danger and it adds in hazard and it requires training and practicing and instruction. So we don't do it, and it's one of the last measures. So it can be done, but again, it has to be done in the correct manner by trained and competent persons.
Fantastic, thank you. I'll now hand over to Mohammed to give thanks and to give the branch updates.
Thank you.
Can you see the presentation, Mohammed?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Jolie. Excellent presentation, Mr. Rob. I really like it, and it was my you can say I have interest in that field, and I have performed the duty of inspector of MEWP, and I really learned a lot from your presentation. Thank you very much for sharing the knowledge and awareness about this. Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, everyone, and best wishes to all the attendees of IIRSM UAE branch monthly meeting number 104. I welcome you in this meeting, either you are member or non-member of IIRSM. Let me introduce myself. My name is Malik Muhammad Asif, and I am Vice Chair of UAE IIRSM branch. As most of you are aware that Mr. Peter is on annual leave, so as the Vice Chair, I am performing duties of Chair of the branch. I would like to share with you the update of the branch. First thing is that IIRSM have started provision of latest updates and information about the risk management on UAE branch LinkedIn page, where we have our 900 followers. Please like and follow that page so you can get latest updates and information about risk management and IRSM activities. Second is that the IRSM UK is going to conduct the Risk Excellence Award ceremony, as every year they conduct that one. And this year on 19th May, from 8 to 9 British Standard Time, the ceremony will be conducted, and that will be virtual ceremony. Okay, don't forget to attend it, and really you will enjoy that ceremony. Please next slide, Jolie. Okay, IRSM always prefer to provide uh, quality training to its members and on non-members. So um, so such as mention the courses titles, dates, and time in the presentation. If anyone is interested to attend and want more information, please email on training@irsm.org. These are very important and very good training courses, and it's available online, and really it's useful for a person those are looking for the knowledge about the risk management and about the development of effective well-being strategies. Next slide, please. Yeah. Again, I would like to request all the members of IRSM, especially for the UAE branch members, so please invite your friends, your colleagues, your all health and safety professionals, those are working with you or you know them, to get membership of IRSM, and because there is a huge benefit IRSM provide to its members, especially, for example, IRS members can get benefit of events. They can attend the events. There are many events such as international branch meetings, which is which they conduct in different countries like India, Saudi Arabia, and also UAE, and many other countries are there. UK network also is there, and West Midland, London, and the Republic of Ireland and Scotland are also conducting the monthly meetings. So a lot of knowledgeable things they are sharing and discussing in that meetings, and which can be helpful for all the members. And also on the website, previous branch webinars presentations are available. And if in case you want to know about that, or you want to use that one, or you want to download that one, it's available on the website. You can go and find easily. Branch updates YouTube channel is available for IRSM, and there you can find very useful material such as COVID-19 recovery network panel discussions, corporate travel safety, emerging risk, business continuity planning, creating and well-being strategies. All the useful videos are available on the YouTube channels. Please do subscribe and like that, so the latest videos and the information you can get easily. IRSM membership benefits, professional development is there, and the climate and sustainability legislation for 20 April 2022. The whole person concept in the workplace is also available. The best of both worlds, creating and maintaining a high performance hybrid workforce. Information is also available for members and non-members, even ARCO can get also. At the end, we do have, okay, we already covered this one, modification by Mr. Rob. So please, next presentation. I would like to thanks to Mr. Rob that he has presented very well. At the end, we have merchandise available. If you want to order that one, we have polo t-shirt, baseball cap, mugs with the logo of IRSM, and we can deliver to you. And the prices are mentioned, and size and detail is mentioned in the on the presentation below the picture of the items. At the end, We are available on the social media. We have Twitter accounts, WhatsApp groups of UAE branch. If you have any question, any query, you can ask us. We will be available for you to answer and help you, support you. We have YouTube channel, email address of UAE branch is uaebranch@irsm.org, and website, definitely you can contact to us also, and LinkedIn page. Don't forget to follow the LinkedIn page, because all the latest update and information we are sharing on that page, and which can be useful for you and your colleagues. Thank you very much. This is what I have for the updates. Thank you, Ms. Jolie and Mr. Rob.
Did you just want to mention the elections? Because I skipped that slide. The election.
Yes, we have already sent the email to all the members, and we have some posts. So I request to all the members, those are interested to participate in election of UAE branch, please submit your application before the deadline given in the email. And this is what we have. We are going to give you chance, and let's come and step forward to participate in election and take a lead. And this is the beauty of IRSM, though. So they are providing chance and opportunity to everyone, so they can show their leadership skills and leadership abilities. So go ahead and participate in the election, and we will welcome the winners, and we will work together for the improvement of risk management and health and safety and well-being of the people within the globe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob, for a really interesting presentation, and thanks for the updates. I'd like to thank everybody for attending. The webinar will be uploaded onto the IRSM YouTube channel in a couple of days, and I hope to see you at the next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much.